Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Miocha and you are watching A News. Let's have a look at the headlines. Tehran rejects claims of negotiations as Trump postpones attacks on Iranian infrastructure. Death toll in Colombian military plane crash climbs to 66. Cause still unknown. And the European Union and Australia seal long-awaited trade deal. Thank you for tuning in. The U.S. has announced a pause in strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure as Washington says talks with Tehran are underway. But questions remain over those claims as Iran denies any talks. Our Ube Shabander has more on that in Washington.
President Donald Trump on Monday announced that he has ordered a 5-day pause of all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure to give room for diplomatic negotiations that are ongoing between Tehran and Washington. On a posting on social media, Trump said that the United States and Iran are currently engaged in talks that will continue throughout the week. Special envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are leading the U.S. effort, and the talks are being reportedly facilitated by the governments of Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, according to reports here in Washington. An Israeli official told Axios that U.S. envoys Witkoff and Kushner had been in touch with the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Reports also indicate that the Trump administration may be considering Ghalibaf as a future leader of Iran that would be acceptable for the White House. This could mirror U.S. policy in Venezuela that left the government largely intact after the removal of Maduro by U.S. forces. The U.S. is continuing to move thousands of Marines and sailors to the Middle East, as well as a major airlift of a large number of U.S. Special Forces to U.S. bases in the region within striking distance of Iran. The Wall Street Journal on Monday also reported that American Gulf allies Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are reportedly nearing a point where they would publicly and directly join U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iranian military installations. In addition to the Marines, the Pentagon is also considering sending approximately 3,000 rapid response paratroopers from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne to support possible U.S. operations in Iran. These forces could be used to seize the strategic Karg Island and deprive Iran of its ability to export most of its oil. I'm Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Meanwhile, Iran's parliamentary speaker and foreign ministry spokesman have categorically denied any talks with the United States. For more from Tehran, we go to our Turaj Shiralilu.
Iranian officials, including Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai, refuted U.S. President Donald Trump's statement on negotiations between Tehran and Washington, branding it fake news. Their statements were made after Trump claimed on Monday that positive and constructive talks took place with Tehran over the last 2 days and backed down from its threat to strike Iran's energy infrastructure. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held phone talks with foreign ministers of Azerbaijan, Egypt, Pakistan, Russia, South Korea, Turkey, and Turkmenistan. According to official news media, quoting foreign ministry press releases, Iran's top diplomat discussed with his counterparts the latest developments in the war and the consequences of the U.S. and Israel's continued military aggression. In separate contacts with his Azerbaijani and Turkmen counterparts, Araghchi explained dimensions of the attacks on the provinces bordering the Caspian Sea and warned of their destructive environmental effects on the world's largest closed body of water. Also in the phone call with Turkish Foreign Minister, he said it was deplorable that the territory of Islamic countries is being misused to attack Iran. While Tehran maintains blocking the Strait of Hormuz on the 25th day of war, Iran's foreign minister told his South Korean counterpart that the strategic waterway is closed only to vessels from the countries involved in the conflict and their allies. Arafji said that other countries' ships have no problem passing through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with the Iranian side. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting from downtown Tehran for A News.
Well, on those consequences of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Japan has announced the biggest ever release of oil from its strategic reserves. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said the country braces for possible shortages caused by the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. In a governmental meeting, Takaichi said they released 15 days' worth of private sector oil inventories last week, and added the country will tap a month's worth of crude from the state reserves starting Thursday. Japan imports more than 90% of its crude oil from the Middle East, making it particularly vulnerable to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. As the Middle East war continues, fuel pressures are beginning to show all over the world. With long queues at petrol stations, factory shutdowns, and university closures, countries across the globe are implementing measures to limit the price rise and cut consumption.
Countries across Asia and Europe are facing fuel shortages and rising energy costs as the ongoing conflict involving Iran continues to disrupt global supply routes. In India's Ahmedabad, long queues of scooters and cars formed outside petrol stations as anxious motorists rushed to refuel. While authorities insist there is no official shortage, reduced deliveries and panic buying have led to significant delays.
You can see the crowd here in Ahmedabad city. Nobody knows why this is happening. We have been stuck at the petrol pump for the past 1.5 to 2 hours. Men and women, everyone is stuck. We don't know why this is happening.
The crisis is also hitting industry. In Surat, a major textile hub, factories are struggling with gas shortages. Some have turned to firewood to keep operations running, while others have been forced to shut down due to their reliance on gas-powered systems.
Some boilers and machines are running on firewood, but there are some others that solely rely on gas. That's why factories are being forced to shut.
The disruptions are largely linked to blocked shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for global energy supplies. India, one of the world's largest energy importers, has been particularly affected, facing shortages of both fuel and cooking gas. In Beijing, motorists queued at fuel stations ahead of an expected price hike as authorities raised retail fuel caps in response to soaring global oil prices. Meanwhile, in Slovenia, the government has introduced limits on fuel purchases to curb hoarding and ease pressure on supplies. Drivers are now restricted to fixed daily amounts, while the army has been deployed to support fuel distribution. The impact is also being felt in the aviation sector, with airlines cutting flights and raising fares as fuel prices surge. Some carriers warn of billions of dollars in additional costs if high prices persist. The conflict, which began in late February, continues to ripple across global markets, raising concerns over energy security and the risk of prolonged disruption.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke on the Iran war, saying there is, quote, irrefutable evidence Russia is providing intelligence support to Iran. Zelensky warned the activity could prolong the conflict in the Middle East and further destabilize the region.
Main Intelligence Directorate. Report on the situation around Iran. There is growing evidence that the Russians continue to provide the Iranian regime with intelligence support. This is clearly destructive activity and must be stopped, as it only leads to further destabilization. All responsible states are interested in ensuring security and preventing bigger problems. Markets are already reacting negatively, and this is significantly complicating the fuel situation in many countries. By helping the Iranian regime survive and strike more accurately, Russia is effectively prolonging the war. There must be a response.
News: North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told state media that the country will never change its status as a nuclear-armed state and will treat South Korea as its most hostile opponent. Kim said Pyongyang's nuclear status was irreversible and that expanding a, quote, self-defensive nuclear deterrent was essential to national security, regional stability, and economic development. He rejected the idea that nuclear disarmament could be exchanged for economic benefits or security guarantees. The EU has sealed a long-awaited trade deal with Australia. The deal, worth about $7 billion, was signed in Canberra with Australia's Prime Minister and the Chief of the European Commission, describing it as a mutual win-win.
The European Union and Australia have signed a long-awaited free trade agreement aimed at boosting exports and strengthening economic resilience amid global trade uncertainty. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the deal is intended to reduce dependencies and expand reliable trade partnerships as global tensions rise.
Today, we are telling an important story to a world that is deeply changing. A world where great powers are using tariffs as a leverage and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. In our story, open, rules-based trade delivers positive sum outcomes. Trust matters more than transactions. It is a story of building strength at home and diversifying abroad through a reliable network of agreements that we respect and uphold.
The agreement will remove tariffs on more than 99% of EU goods exported to Australia, including industrial products and most agricultural goods. However, sensitive farm products will remain subject to quotas, while Australia's luxury car tax will largely stay in place, with some exemptions for electric vehicles. Negotiations lasted 8 years and involved complex discussions over agriculture, geographical indications and market access. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said the deal represents a major boost for the national economy and will create new opportunities for exporters.
The Australia-European Free Trade Agreement will lower trade and investment barriers between Australia and the EU, a market of around 450 million people. This agreement is worth $10 billion to the Australian economy on an annual basis.
Beyond trade, the two sides also agreed to deepen cooperation on critical raw materials, such as lithium and aluminium, and to strengthen defence and security ties. The agreement is part of a broader push by Brussels to diversify its global partnerships as it faces increasing economic competition from the United States and China, alongside rising geopolitical uncertainty.
A military transport plane crashed in Colombia shortly after takeoff, leaving dozens dead and many more injured. 114 Army personnel were on board, as well as 11 crew members. Authorities have launched a full investigation.
At least 66 people were killed and 77 injured after a Colombian military transport plane crashed during takeoff near Puerto Leguizamo on the border with Peru on Monday. The aircraft, a Lockheed C-130 Hercules operated by the Colombian Air Force, went down as it was leaving the runway. Officials say the plane likely struck something near the end of the runway before one of its wings hit a tree as it lost height. The aircraft then caught fire, with reports of explosions on board, worsening the impact of the crash.
Unfortunately, we had an air accident at 9:50 in Puerto Leguizamo, Putumayo. It involved a Colombian Aerospace Force Hercules C-130, registration number 1016. It was covering the Puerto Leguizamo to Puerto Asis route, transporting soldiers from our national army.
Military sources say there were 128 people on board, including 11 Air Force members, 115 Army personnel and 2 national police officers. Though authorities report that 4 people remain missing and are still working to confirm the exact figures. All care protocols for the victims and their families have been activated, as well as the corresponding investigation. Local residents were first to reach the remote crash site, helping to pull out survivors and transporting the injured on motorcycles. Emergency crews arrived later, but access to the area has made rescue efforts more difficult.
The plane took off, and when we looked, it turned around here and started to descend. So I said, "Man, it looks like the plane is going to crash." When we looked, we felt the impact, and I said, "Man, that plane crashed." It's very sad, truly heartbreaking, because it affects not only this municipality but all of Colombia, the families and the children who may be serving in the security forces. So my deepest condolences go out to them. It really is sad.
President Gustavo Petro has separately criticized bureaucratic delays affecting plans to modernize the military, though it is not yet clear whether that is linked to the crash. The crash is considered one of the deadliest involving Colombia's military in recent years, and an investigation is now underway to establish the exact cause.
France is pushing a controversial plan to redefine New Caledonia's status, offering a form of sovereignty within the Republic and a new local nationality alongside French citizenship. Supporters call it a compromise. Critics say it muddies the path to independence. Joining us now to take a closer look at the proposal that's heading to the National Assembly at the end of the month is New Caledonia's Kanak and Socialist National Liberation Front member Mikhail Faure. Welcome, Mr. Faure. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with what's happening on the ground. A recent human rights report accused French security personnel of using disproportionate force against the Kanak population during the 2024 unrest. Is this one of the main factors driving the debate right now, and has anything actually changed since?
Yes, thank you for the invitation, and also I take the opportunity to also thanks the all work that we work together with and Azerbaijan was the chair of non-aligned movement, and also the Baku Initiative Group. That's all thing to follow us as part of the implementation of the Dome Accord. And like you recall, how difficulty like Kanak people live between specifically 2024 issue, and that's true. We use all several opportunity in the international level, like the Special Committee for Decolonization of UN, and also the Human Rights Council. And it is very important for us to maintain our political work in this level, because you know that now in the whole world we have many geopolitical development, and specifically for the Pacific, and we try that it is a great opportunity for FLNKS to maintain our political dynamic, and specifically for our political engagement until the sovereignty of the Kanak country. And second, I would like to just recall that yesterday we have a second election about all municipality in Kanaki, New Caledonia. And FNKS have a respect result for send a political message to Paris, because this week the French MP start a dialogue in the French Assembly to adopt a political decision to New Caledonia. So FLNKS maintain his work in the all level, in the national level and the regional level with all Pacific country brother, and also in the international level with all opportunity like C24 committee, for example.
Mr. Faure, this plan that is heading to the National Assembly, it stops short of full independence for New Caledonia, but goes beyond the status quo. Is this plan a real solution or just a way to delay independence?
It is a plan for maintaining Caledonia in the French windows, and it is not respect the Nouméa Accord, like the General Assembly of UN recall last 5 December, when they vote the resolution about New Caledonia. It is very clear. The United Nations call our administrative power to respect the Nouméa, to respect the Kanak people, to respect all right of Kanak people on the natural resource, for example. So now we continue to work because it is important to again maintain our political dynamic until the sovereignty for the Kanak people, and also we use a new opportunity about European difficulty between the Brexit. Now we look many difficult political difficulty in Ukraine, in Greenland, and also NATO issue. It's not our plan to become economic power or military power in the Pacific. We are a small people. So we try to all part of the folder respect the right for the self-determination of Kanak.
Well, we seem to be having some connection issues. We will try to get Mr. Faure back. Mr. Faure, can you hear me? Mr. Faure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We lost your connection to you for just a second there. But now with this specific proposal, pro-independence leaders and advocates are warning that this setup could dilute the Kanak vote. Is there a point? Do they have a point there? And who would really benefit from this specific arrangement?
In the Pacific arrangement, we have some political connection, a very positive connection with our brother from Melanesian country, like Solomon Island, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea. And FNKS is part of the Melanesian Spirit Group, and also the last summit of the Pacific Island Forum. This is a regional organization. They also adopt the political decision to follow New Caledonia regarding the last step of the Nouméa Accord process, and also we also developed a new engagement with nationalists and independentists from Europe, like Basque country, Catalan country, and to maintain our call for all big European country to say a simple thing. Please work for your region. Please work for your people. For New Caledonia, we are here in the Pacific. We are also another challenge to work with a Pacific country first, and also to develop a new page, a new era of New Caledonia development for the next 50 years.
Let's get back to this document that is going into the French Parliament that envisions, quote, sovereignty within the Republic. If it is indeed passed, who stands to gain?
Yes, this text, it is a law project to adopt the Bougival and Élysée and Odigno agreement. So we use also, like the President Macron have done, a majority in the National Assembly. That's why last month we go Paris with Chair and also Felinkais, Mr. Houi and Mr. Chibau to dialogue with all groups, political groups in the National Assembly in Paris, and we hope that we maintain our Windows talk for maintain the dynamic. Yes, call a French MP to don't vote this text because the government don't have the majority, and we have time. We have to back again to discuss. We're looking for one good political solution for it. You know, now we see also that France is a specific political time with challenge and also world challenge. So it is an opportunity also for.
And
for them to,
Mr. Faure, when we look at the bigger picture here, the independence referendum keeps getting pushed back. Is France buying time or avoiding a result it doesn't like?
So I think it is also difficult for French between long time. When you see the historic of the French colonialism system, you see that they have many difficulties in Africa, in Asia country, and also in the Pacific. So last Felinkais Congress decided to call to French political leader to stop their discrimination process and back on the table for a censor and also the real dialogue for looking for a door, yes, for respect the right of the Kanak people for the self-determination.
Well, Mr. Faure, thank you so much for joining us. We did have some connection issues, but we did understand each other in the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
let's go for a short break, but when we return, more news and analysis. Stay tuned.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
welcome back. You're watching A News. With the U.S. president claiming there are now major points of agreement with Iran and Tehran officials denying that any talks are taking place. To make sense of it all, we're joined by former diplomat Gustavo de Aristegui, coming to us from Rabat. Welcome. Thank you so much. Always great to have you on the program. Now, Donald Trump paused his threat to strike Iran's power plant, saying they reached major points of agreement. He then went on to say to reporters that there are 15 points there. But Tehran says no talks are taking place. What are your thoughts on this conflict of narratives?
Well, let's start with the end of your question. It is very obvious that we do not have first-hand information of what is going on inside this very complex and very complicated scheme of power and regime that the Iranian regime is. It is not a monolithical system, as many people tend to think. It is a tyrannical oligarchy, but because it's an oligarchy and it's not a single-person dictatorship, it is much more complicated to determine who is in charge, who has the upper hand, and who is saying what and to whom. Right now, we have an internal battle between the very hardliners, and those that are fake moderates, as I always say. There is no such thing as a moderate in the Iranian regime. But there is another thing that is essential to understand why some people are fighting to continue in power and to continue with their privileges, and it's corruption. It's a one-word reality that pervades and that covers all the reality of this regime. It is corruption that makes it go on. It is corruption that buys wills and shuts dissidents within the regime. Well, right now, obviously, these indirect talks have been going on for some time. I don't know what the level is, but I was given the name of Mohammed Khabaf a good 2 or 3 weeks ago by some of my very good American colleagues and contacts. They were aiming at him as a possible interlocutor, even when Larijani was still alive. And I mentioned this name in this program some time back. I want to say that the Omanis have been saying that they were mediating in spite of the attacks that they received, and in spite of the very harsh measures that Qatar has taken against the Iranian embassy in Doha, they were also mediating. So right now, the Iranians had no choice but to say that yes, there were some initial contacts, and do not forget what the contradictions, the enormous contradictions in narrative, as you very well said, existed from the very beginning of this war. When the president of the Islamic Republic would say something, then the Revolutionary Guard came exactly 5 minutes after to say the opposite, or even to attack the neighbors to whom the president of the republic had apologized 5 minutes earlier. So right now, this is part of the game, and this is part, unfortunately, of the situation that we're living in. But I can assure you right now that the 3 conditions that Witkoff put on the table when they were sitting in Geneva when this war started are still there, and the Iranians are going to have to accept those 3 conditions one way or another. Even if they presented in any way as the resistance of the regime, that the regime has not fallen, but the regime has changed. It's not the same people in charge. And right now there is a power struggle between the clerics, between the political side, if you want to call it something for lack of a better expression, of the regime, and the Revolutionary Guard. And the only person that has this transactional and transverse horizontal capacity of dialogue is this gentleman, Kalibaf, who, let's remember his profile, was a Revolutionary Guard general. He was the Revolutionary Guard's Air Force chief. Then he became the chief of police of the whole country, the repression arm of the regime, one of the repression arms of the regime. And then he was the mayor of Tehran for 12 years, where he became extremely corrupt, or he increased his corruption levels. There he had the power of doing a lot of very powerful people a lot of favors. That is where everybody that is somebody in the regime lives, with the exception of the spiritual leaders in the holy city of Qom. And last but not least, right now he is the president, the speaker of the Majlis, of the parliament, which you and I know has no power at all in Tehran. But normally some very key figures of the regime have had that as a transitional position to give them the status and the dialogue capacity. And this was the case of Rafsanjani, whom I personally met several times and I knew quite well when he became a so-called moderate after having been a hardliner when he was president of the Republic. And then I met him when he was president of his think tank. It was a very fascinating conversation, by the way, and that I can tell you about some other day. And the other person that had been speaker of the Majlis was precisely Ali Larijani. So you can see that the level of the people that have held this position was sort of like a way of the regime to give them the level and the of interlocution that they need to be a valid and viable interlocutor. So this is the person that we need to look at, and I think that these contradictions inside of the regime are going to continue happening, but the conversations are going on. Trump can be erratic and can be contradictory at times, and he's playing that card very deliberately, in my opinion. But when he says that his best friend, Steve Witkoff, whom is a guy that is loved by everybody, even his enemies, is involved in a conversation and his own son-in-law, you can be sure it's true.
We've heard an interesting denial from the gentleman you spoke of, Iran's parliamentary speaker. He said that no talks are taking place with Washington and that is fake news aimed at manipulating the financial and oil markets. Now, there was a sharp drop in oil prices on Monday as the pause was announced. What do you make of the timing of the announcement?
Well, I think that there's three reasons for this to happen quite clearly. The first is that a good part of the military objectives that were stated by Israel and the United States have been reached. Let us see the raw data and the raw information and intel that we've been receiving, of course, with all the screens and masks that you can imagine. But right now, today, we know that missile attacks have diminished by 90% and drone attacks have diminished by over 80%. So right now we have seen that the efficiency of the attacks is not going on. But there is one thing that really worries me, is that from the very beginning of this war, while the Israelis and the Americans were striking military targets, even if they made some mistakes at the beginning, some tragic ones, may I add, the response of the Iranian regime was immediately to attack civilian targets in all the Gulf countries, be it airports, ports, civilian neighborhoods, desalination plants, oil and gas facilities. Those are clearly civilian targets, and nobody has denounced that as a war crime. They were denouncing the threats of Trump as a war crime, which is completely preposterous. But let's go. The second reason why I think that we are in this situation right now is because there is a very steep and intense level of pressure from the countries of the Gulf that are seeing how their major cities are being attacked. Their livelihoods are being affected very seriously when the LNG terminals and facilities of Qatar are being attacked, or the refineries in Saudi Arabia, or oil terminals in Kuwait or in the Emirates. And then the very fact that the countries in the Gulf, like Qatar or the Emirates, have positioned themselves as islands of stability, prosperity, and a new, better life for many professionals around the world. And this was seriously jeopardizing that. And the third is obviously because the corporate world of the globe, but especially the American corporate world, was desperately calling the president and telling him that this situation could not continue. So these three reasons are at the base of the situation that we're living today.
Well, we have reports coming in that the Americans and the Iranians might hold direct talks on ending the war in Islamabad this week. Now, given everything you've said, we've seen the intensity of the missile and drone attacks drop. We've seen enormous damage across the Gulf on the energy facilities. Taking all that into account, do you believe that we are on a brink of a de-escalation, and how can a victory look like for the Americans, for the Israelis, and for the Iranians?
In the second half of the 20th century and in the first half of the 21st century, victory cannot be considered the same as it was in the Second World War, with the complete surrender or even annihilation of the enemy. The occupation of its land and provoking a complete and absolute regime change. Victory has many, many fathers, and right now defeat is always an orphan. This is Napoleon's most famous phrase. But right now we are going to very much see this. If this war ends in the coming days, thanks to these direct or indirect talks, or let's say the indirect talks that will lead eventually to the direct talks between Iranians and Americans, the Americans are going to claim victory. The Israelis are going to claim victory, and of course, the hard line of the regime, of the Iranian regime, is going to say that they were victors because they did not kneel, and that they did not implode. The regime didn't change, and that the United States and Israel were not able to destroy the regime or to destroy their military capacities. Well, we know that the military capacities are very seriously affected. I don't know how long it will take for them to reconstruct them. I was watching the news, as I do all the time, in different channels, and I was seeing a military expert on Fox News very recently saying that the oil facilities and the gas facilities of the Gulf countries, of the Arab Gulf countries, can be very easily reconstructed, but not those of Iran, and that the missile capacities of the ones, or the missile defense capacities, let's put it very clearly, of the Arab Gulf countries can be easily rebuilt, but the missile offensive capacities of Iran not. And let me tell you one thing, they have it all wrong, because the Russian oil industry could very well help the Iranians rebuild their oil facilities in record time. Let's not forget that Russia is a very serious energy producing country and have all the technology, engineers, and means to be able to reconstruct that. And then, of course, the very direct links, military links between Russia, China, and North Korea with the Iranian regime. So they, if there is no kind of agreement between the West, or the United States, and Iran to stop the development of their nuclear program or their missile program, there will be a redevelopment of both, because they have the means and the ties to be able to do that. So we are at a very delicate position. So victory is not going to be absolute on either side, and probably the only way to put an end to this is to scrap the JCPOA, which is a complete disaster, and that JCPOA is the reason of this disaster. And this is a very serious warning to those that were clapping madly and claiming victory about this disastrous nuclear agreement, that is the one that has enabled the Iranian regime to continue developing their missile systems, to continue developing their military nuclear programs, and that has led to this war.
Let me get your thoughts on this as well. Israel has a different front. They have a campaign against Hezbollah. In Lebanon, they've bombed even central Beirut. They bombed out the bridges in the south of the country. What do you think is Tel Aviv's endgame in Lebanon, and how likely is it that they'll achieve it?
Listen, I lived in Lebanon for 5 years. My father was the Spanish ambassador to Lebanon, who was killed in 1989 in the war. I have Lebanese half-brothers and family, friends. My son is married to a Lebanese girl. I can tell you that I know the country extremely well. And before this offensive, there was a mixed feeling in the millennial Lebanese, and I know what I'm talking about. There is a deep resentment against Hezbollah, but there is also a deep resentment against Israel. And that was not the case maybe 20 years ago. And let me tell you why. Because for decades, and now people are forgetting, the main problem of instability in Lebanon in the 70s and in the 80s that led to the civil war, that caused the civil war in the 70s and intensified in the 80s, was exactly the presence of a state within the state, which was the Palestinian organizations present in Lebanon. Today, the Lebanese have forgotten all of that. And right now, yes, they feel that the state within the state is Hezbollah, but they feel threatened by both. Right now, there is a consensus, and it's a very important one, mind you, between the President of the Republic, General Yusuf Aoun, who's a very decent man, by the way, and the Prime Minister, who's a Sunni Muslim, and a majority of Shia Lebanese that feel oppressed and manipulated by Hezbollah. And there is a majority of the country that is desperate to see Hezbollah disarmed and transformed into a political party. And it has to abide by the rules that everybody else in the country has accepted, except them. And the only monopoly of force and armament needs to be the Lebanese armed forces. And remember that one of the reasons why this war broke out was because one of the conditions that were imposed by the United States, and let's remember them, stop helping the proxies, stop developing your missiles, and stop enriching uranium, were bluntly negated by the Iranian leadership. And one of the things was done directly by the deceased leader of the revolution. He says, if the Lebanese president and the Lebanese government insists in disarming Hezbollah, there will be very serious consequences against them. Well, this tells you what is going on. So yes, right now, the Hezbollah's leaders, to prevent being eliminated as happened last year, in June, are trying to mingle with all the other communities of the country, and they're living in regions and in neighborhoods that are not Shia. They're living in neighborhoods that are Sunni. They're living in neighborhoods that are Christian. They're even living in the heart of the Christian mountain in Beit Meri, or even in Big Faya, but even Jbeil, which is the Christian coast, and this makes it very complicated for let's call them surgical attacks to be completely precise, and they can actually provoke civilian casualties, and these civilian casualties are provoking the rise of the resentment against this present escalation in the south of Lebanon. And last but not least, and I am not suspicious of being anti-Israeli, actually the contrary. I have extraordinary friends in Israel, and I might consider myself a very dear and personal friend of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Sar, and I've been so for over 30 years. But I can tell you that with the rumors that we are listening to about annexing as a security buffer between the Litani River and the present border is completely unacceptable by any standards, and that is exactly what Hezbollah is expecting Israel to do, and that is exactly what is going to help Hezbollah regain its clout on the country. It would be a huge strategic mistake if Israel did that.
Gustavo, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and analysis.
Thank you so much. My warmest regards.
Now let's go for a short break, and then we'll take a look at the major stories coming out of the region. welcome back. There are new reports suggesting that Turkey may be playing a mediation role in efforts to end the war between Iran, Israel, and the United States. While Ankara has not officially confirmed the claims, diplomatic contacts appear to be intensifying. Adam Morrow has the latest in Istanbul.
U.S. news portal Axios and Israel's Channel 12 reported on Monday that Turkey, along with Egypt and Pakistan, is currently acting as mediator between Iran and the United States. The reports suggested that the three countries were working behind the scenes to help de-escalate the ongoing regional conflict. Ankara, however, has not officially confirmed the claims. Tehran, for its part, has firmly denied that any negotiations, in any form, are currently taking place. Nevertheless, for the past several days, Turkey has engaged in intense diplomatic activity. On Monday, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with ambassadors from Gulf Cooperation Council countries and Jordan to discuss the escalating regional situation. Details of the closed-door meeting in Ankara were not immediately made public. But according to diplomatic sources, the talks focused on ways to contain the conflict and prevent further regional spillover. A day earlier, Fidan held a series of phone calls with key international and regional figures. In separate calls, Fidan spoke with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, and U.S. officials. The discussions reportedly centered on possible diplomatic steps to end the fighting, which continued to rage in the early hours of Tuesday. Turkey has stepped up its diplomatic outreach in recent days as the conflict has continued to mount. Officials say Ankara is maintaining contact with both Western and regional actors while pushing for negotiations aimed at reducing tensions. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Another shipment of cargo was sent to Armenia via Azerbaijan. 4 wagons of fertilizers and 1 wagon of buckwheat departed from the Bilajari railway station operated by Azerbaijan Railways. The total weight of the shipped products was more than 300 tons. The train will next pass through Boyuk-Kashik railway station into Georgia before continuing toward Armenia. The developments follow Azerbaijan's decision to lift long-standing restrictions on cargo transit to Armenia. To date, more than 23,000 tons of grain and more than 700 tons of fertilizer have been transported to Armenia through Azerbaijani territory. Turkmenistan is stepping up cooperation with international financial institutions as it prepares a new strategy with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. A News' Sevil Rajapova reports.
Turkmenistan is strengthening cooperation with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development as part of efforts to expand external economic partnerships and attract long-term investment. Plans for a new cooperation strategy covering 2026 to 2030 were presented during a Cabinet of Ministers meeting chaired by President Serdar Berdimuhamedov. The document is expected to serve as a framework for financing projects in both the public and private sectors. Turkmenistan has been a member of the EBRD since 1992, with more than 80 projects implemented to support financial sector modernization, trade and industrial growth. Looking ahead, cooperation is expected to focus on transport and logistics infrastructure, including the construction and modernization of railways and highways. Authorities also aim to align future projects with the European Union's Global Gateway Initiative, which promotes sustainable connectivity and investment. A working group involving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Central Bank and other economic institutions will develop a detailed roadmap for cooperation in the coming months, with negotiations expected to begin in the near term. Overall, the move reflects Turkmenistan's efforts to diversify its economy, attract investment, and play a bigger role in regional trade and connectivity. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
There are renewed calls for girls' education to be restored in Afghanistan as a new school year begins with millions still excluded from classrooms. International officials warn the ongoing restrictions could have long-term consequences for the country's development. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details in Kabul.
The UK Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Richard Lindsay, says millions of Afghan girls will once again be denied their right to education at the start of the academic year. In a message marking the reopening of schools, he warned that excluding women and girls from education harms the country's future and hinders progress in every Afghan community. He stressed that education must be available to all. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan, Richard Bennett, echoed those concerns, saying the academic year has begun while girls are still not allowed to pursue education beyond the 6th grade or attend universities. He described the situation as difficult for Afghan women and expressed hope that they will be permitted to return to schools and higher education. The Afghan government has not yet commented on the recent remarks. The restrictions on girls' education and women's employment have been in place since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. Despite repeated international appeals, there is still no indication the bans will be lifted, leaving millions of girls unable to continue their studies. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.